Hello bookworms! Today I'm going to be doing a book review of The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. So this is the first book in the Wheel of Time series. Wheel of Time is a very beloved, very long-running fantasy series, and it's one that I have always been interested in, but I've also always been incredibly intimidated by, just based on the length of the series. It literally takes up an entire bookshelf on my bookshelf. That's how long it is. And it's also what I had perceived to be a much older fantasy, but I found out I was pretty wrong about that because the first book was published in 1990. I'm actually going to place this behind me so I don't have to hold it for the whole video. So upon reading the first book, I decided that it would be really fun to review each book in the series as a Wheel of Time newbie. And also selfishly, I feel like it'll be really fun to look back on because I read this book back in September of 2019, and since then I have not been able to get this world or these characters out of my mind. I know the number one thing that people suggest is not to look up anything online when you're first reading the series because there are just Wheel of Time spoilers like all over the place, but I did find some resources that I found really helpful. The first one being my friend Jade from Bedtime Bookworm. She made a video of like tips and tricks for people to go by before they start reading the Wheel of Time series, so to kind of get you ready for what you can anticipate, and I found that to be really helpful. So after I read the first book, but you could also watch these videos beforehand, Daniel from Daniel Green made two videos, the first one being the history of the Wheel of Time explained, and it's spoiler free, though because of the way that the Wheel of Time works, I am expecting these events to kind of repeat themselves, although hopefully some things will be changing. And then he also made a video all about the magic system in Wheel of Time, which is fascinating. So I'm going to start out by giving you a non-spoilery kind of summary of the book, let you guys know what some of my feelings were on it. Obviously, I really enjoyed it, and that's why I'm continuing the series, but I'll give you some more specifics about what I really loved, and then I'm also going to talk about some spoilery things at the end of the video, but I will give you fair warning like before that happens. So in the beginning of the book, we're following Rand al'Thor, who is a simple farmer that has lived in Emansfield, which is part of the Two Rivers, for his entire life. He's always dreamed of leaving his hometown, but it's been exactly that, just dreams. He's really content where he is and he doesn't actually want to leave. To be honest, in the beginning especially, I kind of pictured him like Luke Skywalker. So when we start the book, Emansfield is getting ready for Beltane, which is a festival that they have every year to celebrate the coming of spring, though it seems like spring has kind of been coming later and later. And while they are gearing up, there's a merchant that comes to Emansfield and he tells them all of these rumors that he's heard on the road about there being a new reincarnation of the dragon. This rightfully makes everyone pretty nervous because the dragon is an ancient magic user who has basically tainted the male half of magic, and it's been prophesized for years that this dragon would be reborn and reincarnated. In the past, there have been a lot of false dragons, but anytime that news pops up of there being a new one, people do kind of get on edge. So that same day that the merchant arrives, Rand and his two best friends, Matt and Perrin, all saw a very mysterious figure in Emansfield. The figure was dressed completely in black, and they noticed something really strange about it, and that was the fact that even though there was wind, this figure's cape remained completely still, which is pretty unsettling. That night, Rand and his father Tam's farm is attacked by Trollocs, and Trollocs are a kind of monstrous species that are controlled by the Dark One. The Trollocs are scared away by another strange visitor named Moraine, who is basically a lady wizard, and she's a member of the Aes Sedai, along with her warder named Lan. Moraine has been asking some strange questions around town, and after the Trolloc attack, she gives Rand some more insight into why they were there, and she convinces him to leave Emansfield along with her, though he's very reluctant about it. She basically says that the only way to make sure that the rest of Emansfield remains safe is for Matt, Perrin, and Rand to leave with her and go to Tar Valon, which is where the Aes Sedai are based. The Aes Sedai will then provide protection for the three of them from the Dark One, who Moraine believes is pursuing the three of them. Though she can't tell them why. And thus begins our epic adventure. So that was the most non-spoiler way that I could describe things to you. And while that probably did seem like a lot of information, that was really only surface level of a couple of things that happen within the first few chapters. So the first thing that I need to mention is that this book was very heavily influenced by Lord of the Rings. I've heard that this is something that bothers other people, that it is too similar to Lord of the Rings, but I personally love Lord of the Rings, so that's not something that bothered me. I actually really enjoyed it, and I found it really fun to find the parallels between The Eye of the World and between The Fellowship of the Ring, the first book anyway. I know that the series does end up becoming its own thing from what I've heard. So some of the most obvious parallels that you've probably even been able to gather just from the synopsis that I gave you is that in the beginning, we meet our young heroes who live in this really quiet area of the world, kind of like the Shire. And then we have the Lady Moraine, who's basically like Gandalf, that comes and convinces them that she needs them to go on an adventure with her and leave their home because there is a very dark threat that is kind of looming. Then we also have Trollocs, which I initially was envisioning kind of as orcs. And the Trollocs come and attack when the town is getting ready for Beltane, kind of like the way that there's a threat coming when the Shire is gearing up for Bilbo's birthday party. And then just some character similarities. So Matt is basically Pippin, but he's an even more stubborn and naive Pippin, if you can even imagine that. And then we also have Lan the Warder, who is kind of like our Aragorn. I already said that Moraine is kind of like a Gandalf figure, and then Rand is basically like our Frodo. Again, these characters are very much their own thing. The story really does evolve as they are going on this journey, but these parallels are there, like they're very clearly there. Something that I was pleasantly surprised about is that I was actually really worried to go into what I thought was a much older fantasy series, because I expected there to be kind of a severe lack of women and females in the story, but that was not the case. First of all, the entire magic system in the Wheel of Time is only able to be wielded by women at the moment. Men used to be able to use magic in the past, but there were a whole bunch of events that happened, and now any male that tries to draw from the one power, they end up going mad. And the female magic users, who are the Aes Sedai, there is a division of them that is in charge of what they call gentling those males so that they don't use that power and they don't do bad things. The symbol for the magic system is basically like a yin-yang, and there are different properties that are associated with each half. The female side, which is called Saidare, I hope I'm saying that correctly, wields the water and air magic, whereas the male half, which is called Saidin, wields the fire and earth magic. Something that I also found interesting was that despite the Aes Sedai using their gifts in the form of like healing powers and doing things to help the general population, they're often viewed as extremely untrustworthy. No one ever wants to accept the help of an Aes Sedai because they know that it is going to come to a great cost to them. So the Aes Sedai are known for never lying, but also never fully telling the truth. They're known for not doing anything that doesn't somehow benefit them or will somehow result in a deal that will benefit them in the future. So in addition to Moraine, two more female characters that we get to know are Nynaeve and Guini. Nynaeve is the town wisdom, so she is kind of like the healer of Eamon's Field. She is super intelligent, super hard-headed, and she is like really awesome. She's kind of in charge of the town, and she tries to keep things on track even when she's met with resistance from some of the dumber males that are in power. And then we have a Guini, who is around the same age as Rand, Matt, and Perrin, and she's pretty much the only competent teenager from Eamon's Field, in my opinion. I think Rand, Matt, and Perrin are kind of initially hopeless. They definitely do get more wisdom as things go on, but a Guini seems to be on top of her game from the minute that they are out of Eamon's Field. And as I said, there have been many false dragons in the past, so those are the people who are claiming to be the dragon dragon reborn, and that makes people nervous, but it is prophesized that there will be a dragon that's been reborn in the future. It's woven into the pattern of time. Another one of their traveling companions is Tom Marilyn, and Tom is what they call a gleeman, which is basically a bard. He spins stories and he entertains in inns, and you actually learn quite a bit of kind of mythology and lore of the world from his stories, because those things always tend to be woven into song. Before I head into spoiler territory, I just want to say that I truly loved this book. It took me a lot longer to read than I typically spend reading a book. I think I began reading it on September 1st and I didn't finish reading it until September 19th, which for me is a very long time. I usually read books in like 2 to 4 days. That's my average. This was an investment, but it was so worth it. And I feel like these characters are so like deeply ingrained in my being, and I do find myself thinking about them pretty often and wondering where the story's gonna go and how things are going to resolve, and just knowing that I have so many books to go, and this first book was so exciting. Like, I cannot wait to continue this story. A common complaint that I've heard is that Robert Jordan's writing style can be a little bit repetitive. I will agree that he does tend to repeat certain things, but again, it's something that I personally didn't mind and I actually liked, because I felt like he was kind of driving the point home on the things that are important for the reader to remember. This is a very expansive world and there is so much lore, and I feel like the reinforcement is something that was kind of necessary, and I really, as a reader, appreciated that. It wasn't something that bothered me. I really liked his writing style. He does tend to be on the more descriptive side. Like it's dense. It's definitely a dense book, but well worth the read. I personally really enjoyed the pacing as well. I felt very immersed in the world. I was really glad to see so many corners explored as everyone is traveling to get to Tar Valon, and I feel like I have a good handle on things, so I'm really looking forward to continuing on. I'm actually in the middle of reading The Great Hunt at the moment and also loving that one. But that's all that I have to say for my non-spoilery thoughts. So now I'm going to get into the spoilery portion, where I'm going to talk about some of my favorite scenes, some of the things that I definitely saw coming, and some of the things that I thought were a little bit silly. So if you have not yet read The Eye of the World, this is where you're going to want to turn off the video. And if you have read it, then let's discuss. So the first thing that I have to say is it was abundantly obvious that Rand is going to be the Dragon Reborn. This is a Chosen One story, so obviously the main character that we're getting the perspective from is going to be the one that is the most important character in the story. And just in the beginning, we get all of this information about the false dragons, and we have Moiraine looking for these boys that were all born within a certain amount of time from one another, because they could be this potential person that she's looking for, which she had to have been looking for the dragon. So it came as no surprise to me when we found out that Rand was the Dragon Reborn, especially when we find out right in the beginning, like right when the Trollocs are attacking the town, his father Tam ends up getting pretty badly beaten, and Rand has to beg Moiraine for help to cure Tam. And while Tam is kind of suffering through everything, he tells Rand that he's not actually from the Two Rivers, which is a major indicator that he is the one that they have been looking for. But Rand chalks it up to it being like a fever-induced dream, whether it's Rand just denying his destiny, not being ready to accept it, or whatever. It was very obvious to the reader, like, okay, we know where this is going. Then we have Matt, who I just adore. Like, he made so many horrible choices and I just wanted him to stop doing that. But I also really had a soft spot for him, which I think is a testament to how well Robert Jordan created this character, because he really is, he's his own worst enemy and he's creating so many issues along the way, and he's just not learning from past mistakes. But you also are like, this poor guy, like, you just want to help him and see him change. Then we have Perrin, and I thought Perrin's storyline with the wolves was really interesting. I did not see that coming at all, but I think it's a really cool element, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing that explored more in future installments. I also really admired Guini because she has so much drive and passion, and she has always known that she was meant for more than just living in Eamon's Field. She has wanted to leave and travel and like fulfill her true destiny since she was younger, and she's definitely willing to do whatever it takes to do so. So I really admired her spirit and just the way that she has to kind of keep the boys in line. Like, I don't even know how she puts up with them the way that she did throughout the book. And then lastly, we have Moraine, and Moraine was actually my favorite character in the book. Everyone seems to think that she's really untrustworthy because she's a member of the Aes Sedai, but she's literally the only person that is helping them, and she's leading them to Tar Valon to try to get them protection from the Dark One, yet they are constantly, and I mean they as in like Matt, Perrin, and Rand, are constantly questioning Moraine's decisions, and I get being nervous because she's not telling you the full story, but she is the only one that is actively working to keep you boys safe and she's like constantly putting herself at risk for them. And the fact that they kept still not trusting her was driving me crazy. I was like, she is amazing and you guys need to like get it together. Then again, I mentioned in the non-spoiler section, but I really love the magic system. I think it is really cool and I'm really looking forward to learning more about that as well. I would say that my favorite scene in the entire book is the scene at Shadar Logoth. I thought that was so interesting. So there is this man that appears and he asks Matt and Rand to come with him and help him carry this treasure to his horses. He tells them that they can have whatever they want once they finish helping him carry the treasure to where he's going. And we find out that it's this character named Mordeth, and he's actually trapped within the city and he needs to convince people to take things out with them in order for his influence to get outside of Shadar Logoth. Matt obviously is the one that falls for this. Rand actually tends to be more intelligent in this situation and he notices some things as they go into like this cave where the treasures are. But Matt ends up pulling a dagger from Shadar Logoth and it is putting his life pretty much in mortal peril for the rest of the book and so far for what I'm reading in Great Hunt. I just thought the way that everything played out there was incredible. Like, I really loved that scene. I felt like I was there with them and it was so exciting. And I also really like Mordeth as a character and he has like the best name ever. Then another one of my favorite scenes was at the end of the book with the Green Man. I really, really loved the Green Man and I was really heartbroken over everything that happened with him. He was such a fascinating character and I was also really glad that Loial was able to salvage some things at the end, like kind of in his memory. I haven't actually mentioned Loial yet just because he is a character that comes so much later and I didn't want that to be potentially spoilery, but I think the Ogiers are really interesting as well. I love that they have so much knowledge. I really like how different their race is from the human race and I feel like he's going to be a huge asset in the coming books. And he's also just like the nicest person ever. Like, I really enjoy him. And then specifically some things that I thought were really funny within the book, like just silly, like, why are you doing this kind of moments. So anyone who's in Eamon's Field, once a girl becomes a woman, they braid their hair. And once the crew leaves Eamon's Field and Guini starts having these like secret meetings with Moraine and learning more about the Aes Sedai, she unbraids her hair and it like really bothers Rand and he's all like freaking out because he's like, why is your hair unbraided? Like, what are you doing? And it's like, get over it, Rand. Not everything is about you. And he just like insults her and basically compares her becoming an Aes Sedai to being like a dark friend. And it's like, wow, you are so off base here. Another kind of facepalm moment, in my opinion, with Matt is when the two of them get to an inn and they are going to take a bath and there's a bath attendant who is kind of fishing for information and Matt is basically like dying to tell him everything that they've been through and Rand and Perrin are basically like, what are you doing? Stop it. Like, stop talking. Just shut your mouth. And Matt is just not picking up on their cues at all. And again, that ties into me being frustrated with the boys not trusting Moraine, but then Matt immediately trusting this random bath attendant. It's like, how? And then again, going back to the Dragon Reborn prophecy, I don't know if it's because I have read so many books, but I'm really curious if anyone was surprised to find out that Rand was the Dragon Reborn upon their first time reading this. I felt like it was glaringly obvious and I don't know, there were so many context clues that I can't imagine reading it and having that be a surprise, but I'm really curious if anyone did find that while they were reading. I also throughout the novel just felt really bad for Moraine having to put up with these little boys while she's trying to like get things done. Oh my gosh. And then of course I was also like, oh my God, how could you guys do this, when the gang ends up splitting up at one point, and then Matt and Rand end up getting passage on a ship to escape Shadar Logoth, and in order to do so, they trade the coins that Moraine gave them as their payment for this passage, and it's like, ugh, those were clearly very important. Like, why did you think that this was a good idea? I think the things that drove me the most crazy were, I get that these are naive boys that have lived in the same place their whole lives, and they don't necessarily have that like worldly experience to examine things further. They take a lot of things at face value, but there were so many instances where I was like, if you would have just stopped for 1 second and like thought this through a little bit more, you probably wouldn't have made this choice. But then the story probably also wouldn't have been as interesting. So I get it. It's a story. It's entertaining. I really enjoyed the whole thing, as I keep saying, but those were little things where I was just like, oh God, you guys are killing me. So I think that those are all of my final thoughts on the book. I overall really enjoyed it. I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars. It wasn't a 5-star read for me, but it was pretty darn close. I do feel like as I continue reading, there probably will be some 5 stars within the series. I've heard that it's kind of up and down. I know that there are some later books that are a little bit of a slog to get through. I'm not really worried about it, considering that I personally am a character-driven reader. I really like all of these characters, so as long as I'm still following them, and I imagine we're going to get some new characters as well, I'll probably enjoy it anyway. That is my review of The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. Let me know if you've read The Eye of the World. Please, please, please be mindful of spoilers within the comments, because there probably will be people who haven't read this book. And then also just be mindful for me, because this is my first time experiencing the story, and at the moment I'm halfway through The Great Hunt, so I obviously have a long way to go before the story comes to an end, and I really don't want to be spoiled on anything because I'm enjoying it so much. So that's all that I have for this video, and I will see you guys soon in a new one. Bye!